but turn them off so it didn't block anyone's face.
Okay, another participant. Welcome, Joanne. Jojo.
Hi, Jojo.
Jojo.
Okay, are we recording now, Suzanne? Suzette?
Yes. Yes.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. We're just so happy that everyone is here. And for those of you who did have trouble logging on, thank you for your persistence. This is going to be a great night. Thank you. This is our second week of God Talk, conversations about faith, society, and self-love for LGBTQ Christians. I'm Carol, and I'm joining from Taos, New Mexico with my son, Marco. And we have a very special guest with us tonight. We're going to do a more formal introduction a little bit later after our icebreaker. Hopefully, if any late comers can hear it as well. But for now, I just want to welcome the Reverend Dr. Jerry Maynard, aka the People's Priest, a spiritual renegade and social revolutionary. We are so happy you're here. Marco, can you hold up the book?
Yeah, I can do that.
Alex and I were introduced but via this book from Reverend Denise Junius, Partnering with God, and the People's Priest has an essay. This is a book of essays called Partnering with God, and the essay that Reverend Dr. Jerry Maynard included is called God is Obsessed with All of Me. And I know most of you have not read this, so don't be scared but it's a wonderful essay, and I do hope everyone has a chance to look at that at some point. So we're going to go around the virtual room and just make some short introductions and do a little icebreaker question. And what I'd like is for each of you to say the name you would like to be called, and that can be as formal or as casual or as silly as you want it to be. And I want you to include your pronouns, your preferred pronouns, and that's just a reminder of how important that is in our world. And remember that you can also change the name on your screen by the three little dots at the top of your picture. And then our icebreaker question is about dance, since the essay included some reference to dance, and I'd like you to say either your favorite dance or a dance that might best describe your life.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to insult anybody by describing my the kind of dance that would describe my life. So I'm going to just say one of my favorite dances to do, at least, is a two-step. So, and I am Carol with she, her pronouns. Would you like to say something next?
May I? Okay, bye. My Michael. I am, but I am Michael.
He said, I'm Marco, he, him. I also go by King Marco.
Go.
And what's your favorite dance?
Well, any kind of rap.
Any kind of rap, he said. Okay, could we go next to our esteemed guest?
You can refer to me, dear friends, either as Father Jerry or Reverend Jerry, since that's your tradition. If you want to use a title, if you want to be more casual, just Jerry is fine, or Jerry the Magnificent One, or the Fabulous One. I prefer that also. I use he, they pronouns. I'm based here in Humble, Texas, which is northeast of Houston. This is the traditional land of the Atakapa Ishak people. And I really like the moonwalk. I've never been able to master it, but I find it fabulous to just walk backwards, there's some spiritual significance to that in some way, shape, or form. And I will pass the mic on to Larry.
Larry is what I mostly go by now. I used to go by Lair, but it got to be too confusing, so I gave it up. Dance, my favorite is the Latin swing, but most of the dancing I do is the cha-cha. I'd be happy to elaborate some other time.
Will you call on someone else?
Oh, Alex.
Hello, my name is Alex. I go by the pronouns she, they. And now that I'm older, I really, really love dancing salsa. Not that I'm really great at it. I'm better at making salsa than actually dancing it. So, yeah, salsa. And I will pass it on to Craig.
My name is Craig. There is not a pronoun in the English language that I have not been called. So I answer to everything lovingly. And my favorite dance is the freestyle. And those of you who watched me on the dance floor for 2.5 hours at Resurrection's 50th anniversary celebration know what I'm talking about. And the freestyle, you know. All right, I call on Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob. We go by he, they, him. Those are all fine. I've gone by she. Back in the day, we always called each other she. Uh, One of my favorite dances from my past is the hustle. I taught it with my girlfriend. She was a dance teacher in high school, and so I was her partner teaching couples dances. So all the disco dances that we were doing back in the day, I was proficient with all those. I usually followed her lead. And I'm kind of like Craig, I'm just a freestyle. I like EDM. So anything that I can dance to and kind of freeform. So that's me. And I call on Suzette.
Evening. I am Suzette. My pronouns are she, her, y'all. And I don't have a nickname. And I like any dance you can do at a wedding. My favorite's the chicken dance. But usually that means I'm doing something really fun with a cocktail in my hand. So that's my favorite. Chicken dance.
I had so much fun dancing at your wedding, Suzette.
Ah!
Remember, you can remember that.
I totally remember. I'm gonna call on my friend Sandy from Costa Rica. Sorry, I didn't mean to take you while you were getting a bite.
It's okay. My name is Sandy, and I'm a she, her, they, and Costa Rica. My wife and I have lived here for 7 years, and fortunately, because of COVID, we get to be, because of Zoom, we get to be active participants, and I get to be online coordinator for Sunday churches services and get to work with Suzette some on that. And my favorite dance, I'm gonna be the third one to say this, freestyle, because I love to do whatever comes up for me. And little story on that is I was left-handed as a child, but I was forced right-handed by my teachers. So people didn't know I was left-handed. So when I took dance, they thought I was right-handed. So they made me do everything from my right foot. I didn't realize until I was an adult that was my problem on dancing, because I had trouble getting the steps and stuff. So freestyle is what suits me well. And I will call on JoJo or JB, whichever she would prefer to be called. You're muted, sweetie.
Better?
Yes.
I'm JB or Joanne or JoJo, and I go by any or all pronouns, leaning towards they. I'll go with freestyle. I like watching hip hop. I like watching battle dances, that kind of stuff. Can I do that? No. I probably like twist something permanently. So, but that's the kind of dance I like. I think everyone is gone. Everyone, anyone else?
Your honey.
I don't know. Denise, you want to go? That's
Yeah, I'll go. I am Reverend Denise, and I could be called Denise. It's just fine with me. My pronouns are she, her, and dance. I was trying to think of it. My favorite dance to watch is certainly the moonwalk, and we got a chance to see Michael Jackson on Broadway just 2 nights ago on the 14th on our 8th wedding anniversary and our 26 years together. So that was really cool. But if I were to dance, I would want to do the 2-step, but I can't say that I am the best at it or that I even know how to do it. It's just the thing that I would love to be able to do. That's it for me.
Thank you for sharing. We also have one participant, which is Veronique. She is, her name is Veronique, and her pronouns are she, her, and her favorite dance to watch is the tango. Thank you for sharing, Veronique. And thank you guys so much for sharing. I love that you're open to sharing about dance and your favorite dance. In a sense, for me, dance is very symbolic in terms of when you think of your relationship with God and you're dancing and you're having that movement and listening to the rhythm and how things are going in life. And Father Jerry puts that in a very, very nice way, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. Father Jerry is a two-spirited indigenous person. So Shiwa, Father Jerry strives to offer healing medicine at an intersections of church and society through pastoral care and public witness in Houston, Texas, and is currently serving as an interim house chaplain of Kindred Church. As a public...
Marco just said, wow, sorry, I'll mute us.
As a public theologian, Dr. Jerry's essays and articles cover timely and timeless topics, including postmodernism, protest movement, chaplaincy, queer hermeneutics, digital ministry, practical spirituality, and much more. And for several years, Dr. Jerry has facilitated trainings in person and online with different nonviolence peace organizations offering an integrated approach to faith-based social action, which is amazing. Father Jerry also holds a doctorate of New Theology from the New Theology School, where they serve as the Berrigan Brothers Professor of Social Justice, specializing in contextual and constructive theologies. Other academic achievements include holding a master's degree in contextual ministry from Northwind Theological Seminary with a concentration in postmodern ministry and leadership with master level certifications as a coach and trainer. So please give a round of applause for Father Jerry joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
We're very happy to have you. I'd like to just start out by asking you a little more about the essay. Some of the broad themes that we discerned from your essay were community, specifically sharing at table, and also bringing our true and whole selves to the table. You talked a lot about sacramental relationship through communion. And I just really loved the stunning incarnational imagery of joyful dance that you'd use to describe partnering with God. In our culture, one of the things that we talked about last week is in our culture, we also receive images of God that are so much more judgmental than loving. Could you tell us how you came to have such a gorgeous vision about partnering with God?
Why?
I think that's a beautiful question, and there's a variety of ways that I could answer it, but I think ultimately there's two real answers to it, or two parts to the answer, and the reality is that all of us have a notion of God or an experience of God that's based upon our encounter with life. Whether we know it or not, we are daily making theological assumptions and theological statements by just living our life. And I think for some of us, we are predisposed to know certain things about God because of our culture, our background, or how we show up in the world. For Indigenous people, we don't make, in our spirituality and culture, we don't make any real distinctions between the sacred and the mundane. All that is mundane or normal or average is sacred, and everything that is sacred is normal, mundane, and average. So in our rituals and ceremonies, we do a lot of dancing and we do a lot of involvement of our bodies. And so it's assumed that even in your dance and in your movement, in your rising out of bed in the morning, going to bed, and brushing your teeth, all of that activity is in and of itself a sacred experience. So there's no separation between yourself and God. Every single moment is within the essence of God. And so I think as life has unfolded, I have had encounters where that has become more real to me. And certainly over the years, it just has become more true to me. The medieval mystic and theologian, Meister Eckhart, said, it is a lie of God. It is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. And I think that oftentimes we discover truths about God in our daily living that really are very liberating to us. But because we have allowed ourselves to be convinced that God really at best tolerates us and at worst just absolutely despises us, it's hard for us to trust when that truth hits us that God actually loves us and is a part of what is happening in this one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver put it. Does that answer your question?
Wow. That's a beautiful answer. That is beautiful.
Wow.
And I'm going to hand it over to Alex for the next.
I could go.
For me, it was this partnership of including others and being in communion with them and community. Oftentimes, the way that things are now, it's hard to have sometimes those difficult, truthful conversations that are very taboo right now. Talking about government and talking about politics and talking about these important matters from racism and social inequality and systemic oppression. And sometimes it's hard to have those conversations with those that have different views from us. And for me, is how do you build that bigger table with these individuals that are very set in their ways, and we don't want to shut ourselves off from them. So how do we build that bigger table with those that have different views from us? And that also extends into within our own community. when we talk about trans rights and we talk about the trans community, we talk about gay men, lesbians, non-binary. How do we build that bigger table?
So I think that's a great question, and it's a very challenging question, but I'm a big believer, and I think it's important to lean into the discomfort, to lean into the challenge, to lean into the pain, as well as to lean into the pleasure and the delight. And I think really, for me, a answer, because I think to this question in particular, there's actually a multiplicity of answers that we all need to be able to give, and might give in different contexts or different situations. But for me, a answer would be found in the actual thing that we do at the table. In the Eucharistic rite, it says, this is my body broken for you. This is my blood shed for you. So there's an act here of you have to be willing to be broken, and you have to be willing to allow your life to be poured out, which means that you have to be willing to be nourishment for the other person. And they have to be willing to do that to you as well, to be that nourishment for you. So to expand the table, to make it even broader and wider, means that we have to, first lean into the vulnerability of taking the risk of allowing ourselves to undergo the pressure of being challenged, being provoked, being triggered, and allowing that to break ourselves open so that we can become nourishment to the other person who is with us. Now, that does not mean that we allow for abuse to take place. It's because when abuse happens, nourishment is not happening. So we have to establish boundaries. We have to say, this is what I am willing to do. This is how far I'm willing to go. But I have to have you also be willing to give something to this experience. We both have to be willing to be broken open. We both have to be willing to pour out our lives to each other and receive what is given. Receive what is given and allow it to nourish us. And sometimes when you go to like a buffet and you go and you get your plate and you have your little tray and you're picking out the stuff that you want, we invariably pick out a lot more than we actually are going to eat. So we sometimes also too in these situations receive a lot more than we can actually process. And that's okay. It's good to sometimes say, I can't finish all this right now. Maybe I need to take it in a to-go container and put it in the fridge for tomorrow. And sometimes in these encounters, as we are building community, as we are allowing ourselves to be the nourishment that other folks need, to be in right relationship with one another, there will be times where you'll say, okay, I need to stop for now. And I will pick this up again tomorrow or next week or next year, or in this next go around. But you don't have the right to disengage. And that's the difference. That's the challenge, I think, of Christianity, of being a disciple in our current time, is that you don't have the authority to say, I'm just stepping away. You have to lean into it. This is the vocation of what it means to be a disciple in a provocative and provoking world.
Oh my God, that actually leads me into another kind of thought where you say to God partners with our true selves. And you mentioned having a vulnerability. So we need to have a vulnerability with others. But do you think that maybe when we're kind of not forced, but put into that vulnerable space to be vulnerable with God, that sometimes that prevents us from bringing our true selves to God? Because it's a very, very vulnerable space to be in.
think I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me reframe it or represent it back to you, and maybe you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting. But if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that sometimes these vulnerable experiences also to sometimes lead us to being vulnerable with God, and that in and of itself is something that's very challenging and unsettling. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So great. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there have been times in my life, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more going on if I stay on this planet any longer, where I have a lot of very like timid approaches to the altar of the Lord. And I think to myself, oof, if I really told God how I feel right now, God's going to be like, you're done. We're moving. We're taking you out of here. And every time that happens, I always remind myself, if that was the case, if that was the true nature of who God is, I would have been gone a long time ago. That was actually a very revelatory experience for me when I was coming to terms with gender and sexual things. I suddenly realized that the church that I was brought up in lied to me. And they said that, God did not like me, God hated gay people and queer folks. And in my tradition, I was born and raised Roman Catholic, and it's still official Catholic teaching in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that queer people are intrinsically disordered, which basically means that there's nothing that we can do to fix ourselves. We are just perfectly depraved. And I remember having the realization that, if that was true, why would God create you? Why would God put us on this planet? That sounds like a very epic form of gaslighting. That God would create you and then say, you're deficient. You're not good enough to love. There's nothing I can do that will ever allow me to love you. Then that says to me that God is not the all-powerful God that we claim God to be. Because if God is truly all-powerful, God can love whoever the hell God wants to love. And so I discovered that I was lied to. So I reclaimed the actual truth, which is that God is radically obsessed with me. And when I discovered that, and when I discovered that I am the beloved child of God, that Genesis 1 is true, that when God created all of the cosmos and us, God said it is good and very good. And everything else is a lie. And I want to live my life in such a way that I'm residing in that truth in every possible moment, and also help other people live in that truth as well. Which means I have to get over this silly, inclination that I have been trained to believe that I can't go to God for anything. And in fact, I often tell people in pastoral counseling, when you go to prayer, if you're mad, yell at God. If there's any being in the universe who could handle it, God can handle your cursing and your yelling and your aggression. Because God, again, wants all of us. There is no separation in divine consciousness and divine mind. So yeah, I think it's okay for us to feel like we're vulnerable before God, because that vulnerability also allows us to it gives God permission to love us more deeply. And sometimes that's hard, especially when you have been trained to believe that you're not deserving of love, whether that's from other people or from God. So actively reframing that and easing ourselves in to that situation is completely part of the work of discipleship today.
Wow. That is awesome. Father Jerry, if it's okay with you, I'd like to open this up a little bit to the group. And I think Sandy had a hand up. No, that was you were just moving your hand.
Well, you guys are more than welcome to join in and ask Father Jerry any questions or just to elaborate further on what he's shared so far. Yeah, Larry.
You had said, I wrote it down. when you were talking about the willingness to be broken before each other and being nourishment for others and they for you, and then you said you don't have the right to disengage. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because that's my go-to move, to disengage. People don't get 3 strikes with me usually. It's just like they might get 1, but the very appearance of 2, and it's like, bye. So help me out.
Absolutely. I appreciate that very much, because I feel like for a lot of us, that's our go-to, modus operandi, is to just, kind of tap out. And I think in certain situations, it's okay to step away. But I think stepping away and also is different than saying, I'm completely not engaging in this situation. I think engaging and giving people, a couple of chances is good. And if after a few chances, we don't feel like something is manifesting from this situation, I think it's okay to step away. But I think what I mean when I say you don't have the right to disengage, what I mean is you don't have the right to write off that any possible change, growth, or manifestation in that situation. There should always be in your mind the possibility that something good, beautiful, or true could happen in that situation, even if you're not involved in it, right? So that's the part that I think is really key. We don't have to necessarily be the total nourishment for somebody else. For us, our nourishment for that other person could just be almost the equivalent of a saltine cracker. That could be the only thing that we are called to give that other person. Whereas there might be other people in our life where we are called to be a 4 or 7 course meal for that person. But it is our job to never say there's nothing good that can come from it. Like in scripture, when it says, what good could come from Nazareth, right? It's like, that was their prejudice. It's not, we don't have the right to say there's nothing good that's going to come from that situation. And so always leaving the possibility for just even an ounce of something to happen there is part of our job as disciples in our current time, to build that table a little bit broader. And, we could do our little part here and then say, okay, somebody else is going to do the rest. Does that answer your question?
Yes. It kind of reminds me of a meme I saw a while back that said, we are not called to set ourselves on fire to keep someone else warm.
Right. Love it. Those memes have a lot of truth to it.
I love that you said that, walking away, that not to miss out on that opportunity that could be something magical. And just thinking of, we're not moving the mountain by ourselves. The more people that you bring in, the more that you will be able to move anything. But it's about starting small and taking little baby steps towards what you want to see happen, and not shying away from those opportunities that can be very challenging and a very vulnerable spot for us.
Yeah, we have a phrase in Indian culture or indigenous culture where we talk about being good medicine. And all of us were born good medicine. All of us can be healing for other people. But there are certain times where things happen, whether because of choices that you have made or experiences that you have gone through, that make you bad medicine for somebody else. And that means that you need to be aware of when you are becoming bad medicine for somebody and say, I'm no longer good medicine for this person. So maybe I need to step back, do something to heal myself, and then come back around. All things work circularly. And I think there is some truth to that. Like, I I had a relationship with a colleague of mine that kind of devolved into ultimately becoming a situation where we had both acknowledged, the faults that we created against each other, that we did against each other, the mistakes that were made, sought some type of reconciliation. But ultimately, what happened was the decision was made that, on my part, that this person has become bad medicine in my life for whatever reason. It does not mean that they cease to be good medicine in general, period, because they still are good medicine. But for me, they are bad medicine. Therefore, I need to set up some boundaries, some procedures, some ways of engaging that allows for me to remain healed and healthy and whole. And so, we made a decision that, we probably shouldn't partner together on certain things. But, we also agreed that we wouldn't speak ill of each other behind closed doors or with other colleagues and things like that. And I think that's part of learning to relate as adults, to be grown-up Christians. But I also think it's just a better way of living. You feel better after it's all said and done. Don't let me be the only one that talks. Somebody else needs to speak. Because I can speak all night.
Bob?
Yes, with the holidays coming up, I have some, I guess, reservations about one side of my family who is really MAGA Republican. So I feel that I need to disengage a lot with conversations with them because you can't really carry on productive conversations with them. Do you have any suggestions? One side of my family is my brother's a youth pastor at First Baptist Church in Brenham. We don't really talk a lot of politics on that side of the family, but sometimes the gay issue does come up, which they're very accepting, but sometimes they question me about that. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on this holiday season, how we can approach that.
Yeah, so I always tell people what I'm willing to talk about in a situation. So I always say, hey, it's good to see you. Let's talk about this. And I always tell people it's so important to control your narrative, because there are very few things that we actually have in our life that are truly ours, and our narrative is one of them. So if you're in those situations this holiday season with your family where you're like, oh, what are they going to say? You tell them what to say. You say, I'm willing to talk about X, Y, Z. If you talk about anything that's not X, Y, or Z, I will leave the room, or I will go to another place. I'll make it known that I'm not willing to cooperate with that situation. And or you might say, I'm going to change the subject. And it's that way you're engaging in the situation, you're maintaining your control and your power, but you're also allowing for the situation to have the opportunity to have something good to come out of it, even if it's just 4 or 5 minutes of some very basic generic niceties. If that's all that can come out of the situation, that's fine. No judgments about it. It is what it is. I think that's, for me, that's how I usually handle that. Yeah.
Thank you. That gives me a little power. Thank you.
Craig?
All right. So, Father Jerry, I was wondering if you would be willing to share with us maybe a personal experience, or I'm sure you've had many, but would you share with us a personal experience in your life that made God absolutely real to you?
Oh, let me see. I think Oh, that's a hard question. There's so many experiences that happen so often. I say that I don't want to sound like, I have regular conversations with God and like God comes down from heaven and sits and has coffee with me. Because it doesn't sound like that. It would be nice if God happened that way, but oftentimes it doesn't. But I think because I'm so hyper aware of the reality of how God sometimes just touches every moment, um, it's sometimes difficult to identify one particular moment. But I will say this, I find for myself, um, so I was born with a genetic birth defect that required a lot of extensive surgeries, um, and then also caused some medical trauma, which is why I have a therapist. But the way I look now is very different than how I looked when I was growing up. And but one of the interesting things about that experience, about that I discovered later as I got older, was that even in those moments where you don't like your body, where you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in your body, where there is pain and discomfort, God is still there. And I remember having a very deep and intimate experience or understanding of the incarnation going through those operations, because it forced me to accept that this is the body that I have, and this is the experience that I'm going to go through in life. So what good is in here? What good is here? What is a blessing that is here? And in that experience, I was able to learn to distinguish what is the mark of God that is in this moment, that is in my life, and what isn't, right? And so I, on a daily basis, that's a question that I contemplate often is, where is the mark of God in this moment? And I have found it in going through various, healing journeys. I have found it in love, in sex. I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about in church spaces because people are uncomfortable about it. But, a good hookup can be a very sacred experience. uh, uh, Cruising can be a wonderful experience. That's why in my essay I talked about bringing all of yourself to God, and that includes those secrets that you whisper during pillow talk, that really give that other person an insight to the inner workings of your life, to those things that maybe you're afraid of, that that you don't want to tell anybody except in a whisper, in a hushed tone. Even those things can be sacred experiences, sacred encounters with God. So yeah, I'm sure after this is over, I'm probably going to think of a bunch of experiences, but I would say that would probably be my answer to your question.
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability and what you've just shared. And I feel that love is exuding from you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very neat to share that it is trending on TikTok, that praying before sex. So just wanted to share that with you guys.
I love it. I love it. The sex is a prayer too, in Jesus' name. Amen.
It brings us closer to another human.
Absolutely. I mean, I often tell people it's one of the very few physical ways that we can experience the level of creative power that is the creator. And that's why I don't know if any of you have seen it yet, but it's on Prime, on Amazon Prime and Paramount Plus. Also, I think on Hulu, maybe. But it's a show called Fellow Travelers. And it's a mini series, and I think there's gonna be like 7 episodes. Right now, there's only 3 out. But it's really good. And it's really good because it explores this like love relationship between these 2 men, and how they have these 2 different experiences of navigating what it means to be gay men who are looking for love in the long term, but in the moment they're going after lust, which I don't make a distinction between, and how they're both like how they're navigating it into their own unique ways. One is very detached and very much playing the game of the 1950s of being closeted and navigating that and using code phrases and going to only special places and having all those things. And then one is very much wanting to find the truest, most meaningful experience in these encounters. And I think what's really beautiful and holy about that is it shows that even in encounters that are happening within oppression, there is the potential of something divine that happens. And that divine thing is love, but not just a physical love. It's a love that that calls us to build community, which is ultimately what's happening in the story, is that people are trying to build community, despite the pressure, the anxiety, the fear, the angst, the risk, which is also a part of discipleship that we don't oftentimes talk about. So all of that is a part of the story of discipleship. It's all a part of what it means to be people who are doing theology in real time, right? I think that's also a big part of my work in particular, is that I'm trying to help teach people that we're doing theology in real time, in the streets, on our screens, and also too on our feet. That this is something that we're living through. This is not just something that we do in the sanctuary or with dusty old books written by people thousands of years ago, but we're writing a New Testament right now with our life. And that includes what we do out in public as well as what we do behind our bedroom door. So it all has to be a part of the equation.
Yes. And that is a beautiful way to put it. And we're talking about being whole, just to bring it back to kind of the question about not disengaging and nourishing others by our being broken open. It just seems so profound to me sometimes, just people's lives, people just being present, people just especially as queer people, as it just like Bob, to your question, it seems like, I mean, you're already engaged by just going with your family. I mean, and just being who you are with them. That by definition is not being disengaged. So just kudos to you and everyone on here for just being present and being themselves. I think that is just so powerful.
I'm currently looking for a place to live, and the Woodlands, for those of you that don't know it, it's predominantly white people that are of a certain class or are a little bit better off. And a friend of mine asked me, do you really want to move over there? Are people really gonna accept you, or are they just gonna leave you out? And it dawned on me that it is not in the comfort place that I need to stay. It is in those places that are not necessarily open to someone that is Latina, who is a lesbian, who is a minority, who is a woman. That's the space I need to be in and have, be that representation and not shy away from being uncomfortable and vulnerable, and shy away from those conversations that can help with change. And and just reading your essay, that reminded me of that I have to remember that God is with me even in the mess of it all. And if I consider that to be mess, engaging with others that are different from me, I know that God is going to be right there with me. And that's where God wants me to be. That's how we are partnering together. So thank you for saying that and writing that God is right there in the mess with us.
Absolutely. You can't have a message without a mess, you know. And what is a mess too, also, you know, like, because for some people a mess is a mess, and in other people's messes is not a mess, you know. So it's an interesting phenomenon, I think. Anybody else have a question, comment, rebuttal? Bob?
Yeah, I really feel God. I participate in the legislative advocacy days when the Texas House and the Senate are in session. You know, going to advocate for or against most of the policies that are being presented. You know, in front of the elected officials, and that's when I really feel God a lot. In there with me fighting is during those moments where I'm advocating for others or advocating for a group of people. And I just wanted to share that.
I might have seen you there. I've been there several times.
Yeah, I usually do the HIV advocacy days, the equality Texas advocacy days, and another one or two of them.
That's a great example too of partnering with God around how we prepare ourselves for living a healthy life. You know, we now have protocols and procedures for dealing with certain types of viruses and diseases and things like that that we never had, you know, 40 or 50 years ago. Now, in the fight to eradicate HIV, we have PrEP, pre-exposure prophylactic. And I oftentimes tell people, I say, you know, that is in and of itself a theological statement or a theological practice, because what you are doing is you are saying that I am risking an encounter with another human being because of love, because of a desire for connection. And I want to be able to love all of this person and all of myself. And so I take this pill to give me a license to be able to engage more freely, more wisely, more intentionally. And that is a beautiful thing. That is a holy encounter. In fact, I have a prayer. It's somewhere in the midst of all of my paperwork, which you cannot see because it is perfectly hidden. But I have a prayer that I sometimes give people when they are discerning whether or not to go on PrEP. A prayer that they can say when they are starting their PrEP and right before they take their pill, so that even that moment could be a holy moment. I sometimes tell people when they are have recently been diagnosed with maybe depression or anxiety or some type of mental health diagnosis and have to take a medication that they're going to be on for the rest of their life, and they feel a lot of worry about, I oftentimes tell them to pray over it and say, may this medication work for me in the most productive and healthy way possible, and may every possible side effect dissipate or be less lessened when manifesting. In that way, we can take more ownership of our lived experience, because our lived experience is also a holy experience. So that's just another example of a daily way that we partner with God.
Yeah, with World AIDS Day coming up, I've been reflecting a lot on our journey. I've been HIV positive for 34 years, and by the grace of God, he took me from the grasp of death in 1994, and I've lived since then in my journey with God. And I've just been really reflective on the past 35 years.
Thank you. We are glad you are here. Craig, do you have a question?
Yeah, first, let me just say, Bob, you look marvelous. I told you that. You're looking good, Bob. And we're, just so grateful for your justice ministry leadership. You're out there, feet on the ground, inspiring, encouraging. I mean, I literally voted in November because of you. I was going to be so lazy about it, but I literally voted because I saw all the posts that you made. So thank you. You're very valuable in this community. My question for Father Jerry is, we all have those experiences in our lives when we meet someone or we read something or we have an encounter and you're kind of like, it takes your breath away and you're like, oh, I'm in the presence of like a spiritual superpower. Who have been the spiritual leaders or authors or, who have been the people that inspired you as you were coming through?
Well, one of them has been on my mind for several weeks now because he's actively in transition from this realm to the next, and that is Bishop Carlton Pearson, a great teacher of radical inclusion who really truly risked it all and lost everything because of the desire to love God's people more fully and more radically, the way that God loves us. In fact, he's the one that I heard say that there is no separation in divine mind. I remember hearing that and almost falling out of my seat because I just resonated so much with that. He's a big important figure in the formation of my theology around inclusion, but also too the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who died a few years ago. He was a very formative teacher of mine. I call him Thai, which is Vietnamese for teacher. His teachings on meditation and mindfulness and were very formative for me, particularly because he used to say that we have to learn to be a lotus that blooms in a sea of fire. And I love that. I remember when I first heard that, I was like, damn, I wish I would have came up with that. It's like, but that's so beautiful because for people who don't know, the lotus is a really beautiful flower. But what's so interesting about it is it grows in mud. It literally grows in the dirtiest, wettest, most ugly, disgusting place it can grow. And yet it is such a beautiful flower. And that is, that's why he oftentimes said, if there's no mud, N-O, there is no lotus. But if you know the mud, K-N-O-W, you will know the lotus. And so too, that's a quote that I come back to often. I ask myself, like, well, how am I the lotus that's blooming in the sea of fire today? And what a great analogy for the life, the world or the society that we are finding ourselves in, where there's fire literally all over the place. How are we blooming in the midst of that? So Thai taught me that, which is also too a part of the not disengaging, but being feet flat on the floor, right there in the midst of all of it. He used to say, people think that the miracle is walking on water, but the real miracle is learning to walk mindfully on the earth in this present moment. Because ultimately, when you learn to do that, you're basically making a commitment to saying, God is here, and I'm going to find them. And what do you normally find? You normally discover that God's right there in the midst of you. Meister Eckhart, who I've already quoted so far, he's also one of my favorite theologians and teachers. He has a quote he used to say, what is the point for Mary to give birth to Jesus 2,000 years ago if we are not giving birth to Christ today in our midst? I just think that's fabulous. And Let me see, I'll give you two more. Ram Dass is another teacher that I really love. I think he's fabulous. I'm not a big advocate for LSD, but God bless if that's what you want to do. I'm sure God can be found in that experience as well. And Roshi Joan Halifax is also a great, she's a Buddhist teacher. She studied in Thich Nhat Hanh. She lives in New Mexico. I was blessed to meet her in 2015 in New Mexico. I really enjoy her teachings because she teaches a lot and writes a lot on compassion. And she has this phrase that I use a lot of: strong back, soft front. How can we be people who have a strong back, that allows us to stand tall in the midst of all that's happening, but also have enough of a soft front that we still invite life to happen, to come in. We still invite relationship to come in. So those are some of the teachers that I have traveled with and that I carry in my heart. But I'm also, I have studied extensively most of the world's most major religions, and I love all of them, and I find wisdom in all of them. But I also truly am obsessed with Jesus. I think Jesus is lovely. I like what he has to say about liberation. I like that he said, "Greater things will you do when I'm gone." I don't know of any other teacher who has ever said something to that effect, that spiritual teacher who said something to that. Like, I'm doing cool stuff while I'm here, but when I'm gone, you're gonna do even better stuff. So I'm still trying to figure out what that better stuff is, but I'm committed to making it happen.
Would you say that means you're all in?
Absolutely. I was wondering if I could remember that. I wrote that down. I was like, I need to make sure I say that. Yes, I'm all in, 100%. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And there are, if I want to be completely honest, to Larry's point in the beginning, there are days where I'm like, I don't want to do it. Not today. I give up. And on those days, I had those last couple of days have been kind of like that, where I was like, I'm gonna hide under the blankets and not get out of bed and drink coffee and eat a bunch of food that's probably not good for me, but it's tending to my soul, and I think that's allowed. I think that's good, but we can't stay there. And thank goodness for people who get us out of that rut, and tell us, okay. Brene Brown has this wonderful book called Braving the Wilderness. That's a wonderful book to get. But actually, now that I'm talking about it, that's not the book I want to reference. She has another book called Daring Greatly. Both books are great. Get both of them. But this one particular book, Daring Greatly, is wonderful because it starts with this quote. And in the quote, it talks about, it's called The Man in the Arena. And so if you Google that, you'll find it. I don't remember who exactly said it. It was one of our presidents, I think. And she talks about how this, when it comes to criticism and what we say, what people say about us, really, it doesn't matter what people say, especially when those people who are saying all the stuff that they're saying about you are coming from the cheap seats. Because really what matters is the input and the feedback from the people who are in the arena getting their butts kicked with you, because they are a part of the struggle. They are the ones who are engaging with you. And it's good to have those people with you, and it's good to get the feedback from them, and it's good to be engaging with them. But you also need those people who are standing outside of the ring with towels, with water, with bucket, with bandages, because there's going to be times where you get yourself so beat up that you have to get out of the ring, and they have to tend to you. Let them clean you up, let them dust you off, but you can't stay there. You have to get back into the arena. And that arena requires us to risk love, to risk vulnerability, to risk encounter. But in every risk, there's a reward, and every reward sometimes leads to another risk. So don't shy away from it. Again, all in. all in.
It's that absolute love and divine acceptance
Mm-hmm.
that God gives us every day. And whether we want to accept it or not, God is there giving it to you and saying, yes, I absolutely love you despite your anxieties, despite of your mistakes. I am there for you. And saying I'm all in. And yeah, we have to be all in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's God's only, you know, when God thinks of us, God thinks good thoughts about us. Period. Full stop. There are no negative things that God has to think about us or say about us. And I think when we learn to allow that to settle into our spirit, we don't hesitate to go to God. There are times where, like just the other day, I was having one of those days where I was just annoyed. Everything was bothering me. I was like, look at me a wrong way, and I will lose it. And I went on a walk, which is one of my spiritual practices. And in on this walk, while I'm trying to like process things, I remember beginning to talk out loud. I'm sure if people saw me, they thought I was crazy. But I was talking out loud to God, and I was like, you know, God, I really am not having it. Like, I'm not going to live this way. I don't want to have this, that, or anything like that. I know you're God, and you're supposed to be the one who makes like decisions, but you're not really doing it correctly. So I'm taking over. And I'm making the decision right now because you're being way too covert, and I need you to be a lot more overt. And so, if you don't know how to do that, that's okay. I'll teach you how to do it. And I was being very sassy with God, and God loves it. And I think that's beautiful. And afterwards, you know, I felt like I got off my chest the thing that I needed to say, and I'm sure God heard it, and God was like, okay, that's cute. Let's move on. And so do that. It's okay. God loves it. And you can still come to the table. God still sets a feast for us.
I love how you humanize God because, you know, I really don't think of God in a human way. But your comment about gaslighting and having a conversation, and I mean, that just like opened a whole new door for me. Like, I could just have a conversation with God and God will listen, you know. I can talk to God like I'm talking to you. And you know, making God relevant in today's world, in today's time, not somebody that was from the Bible, you know, this mysterious form of something I don't know that appeared on the pages of the Bible. And I don't have a personal relationship with God in a human way. I have a spiritual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really great way to think about God. Thank you for opening that up to me.
Marco has inspired me sometimes in that way. Some of the ways that he would pray out loud sometimes were just like I remember one time when I was just really struggling with self-esteem and everything, but trying to think about, you know, being created in God's image and stuff. But Marcos just says prayers like, God, you are great because I am great. Or, you know, something just really confident, like you know, just it's just beautiful to just think about how other people can just
I you. I go to you, but
you have a question.
You,
yeah, what is it?
Where I make a big guy, okay, what you going to do?
What's going to happen? Oh, what about that situation?
Yeah, what?
So like, did God answer you? Did God...
Oh, I think it was one of those moments where I had to be sassy for a little while, and God was just letting me be like, okay, you just need to say what you need to say. And it brought clarity in the situation. So yeah, I think the answer was that I needed to have clarity about what it is that I wanted and I did not want in this particular life situation. But sometimes, you know, the best answer to God's or to our prayer is just going through the prayer. You know, the prayer in and of itself sometimes is an answer. And also, I think I think this depends on your tradition that you were raised in, but for some of us, I think we think of prayer as all these really fancy formulas and situations and stuff like that. But you know, when you are in I use this example all the time, but I also use it with the irony, internal irony, knowing that I really don't like elevators. But I always use the example of if you're in a hotel or in like a building and you have to get into an elevator to go to like the next floor, and you get in and the doors close, and then like you start going up, and all of a sudden something happens and it starts free falling. You know, in that moment, you're not going to say, God, who is omnipotent and all-knowing, and who is born of the Theotokos, who is the God-bearer. You're not going to use, you know, and Jesus, who is the hypostatic union. You're not going to use all these fancy theological terms. You're going to be like, oh my God, what is happening? I don't want to die. What's going on? No, please save me. Send all your angels, you know, all that. That's how you're going to be. And that's true prayer. You know, all those other words and things like that are beautiful, and they help us to show our intellect, and our intellect is a part of what it means to be human and we can use our intellect to pray. And it's good to exercise that beautiful gift of intellect by using these big words and these fancy formulas and things like that. And that too can be an honor to God. But if it doesn't come from the heart, if it doesn't come from that authentic place, it's kind of a little silly. It's just, you know, all it is just a bunch of hot air, you know. But if it can come from a place to where this is really me in this moment, that's a good prayer. That's a good prayer. And that
so a book that a number of us on Wednesday nights are studying the book Faith After Doubt by Brian McLaren. Yeah, so we're looking at that book right now on Wednesday evenings, and it's just refreshing to have that conversation. And you know, expressed that several times here in the last few minutes. You know, it's you know, okay, we see each other on Sunday. We know who the Sunday people are, but it's nice to get to know the Wednesday night at 7 o'clock person, you know, where things might not be so wonderful and the smile might not be that big. And so thank you for sharing, you know, some of that vulnerability and some of those moments where you're, you know, yeah, sometimes maybe we do kind of want to argue or you know, we want to have tough conversations with God.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the word blessing comes from the Latin word benedicere, which literally means to say good things. Dicere means to say, and bene means good. So the word blessing literally means to say good things. So when we bless, you know, we're saying good things about whatever it is that we're blessing. So, you know, so anytime you say something good to another person, that's in and of itself a blessing, which is a prayer.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I know she's, go on.
I know on my daily walk, I tie my dog walk around sunrise so I can look at the sunrise with Houston in the background on Buffalo Bayou. And that's my conversation with God every day is just me praising him in his in the sunrise that he's allowing me to experience. So that's kind of my devotional every morning with God. That's when I feel closest, I think, each day with him.
I feel like I have a devotional moment every time I see somebody beautiful walk by. I'm like, oh, look at you. Hello, naked sir, half naked sir. uh, that's a beautiful encounter with the Lord. I know, Reverend Denise, you were just observing and holding space for us, but I would love to hear something from you as well before we wrap up.
Yeah, I just think that it's a beautiful conversation that we're having, and I'm thinking about those people who may not see themselves as a partner with God, and so what kind of what would you actually say to support a person in that position? Maybe they don't feel that they are, me and God. Oh no, and I know the root of a lot of that thinking has to do with not feeling worthy.
Yeah, so it's a process. I think it's a journey that we have to go on, and I don't think it's ever going to be. I think we're gonna always have moments where we have questions about worthiness that manifest in our life. I know certainly I deal with them on a regular basis, but I think really truly questioning ourselves and thinking, if the word is true, that when God created us, that we are good and very good, then that's it. That's the end of the story. And that means that I can engage in this situation with God, in this journey with God. And I think also too, what comes into this, so the book, Partnering with God, is a theological collection of theological essays that is a part of a broader movement called open and relational theology. And open and relational theology has as one of its presumptions that God doesn't want to be the only one in charge. And because of that, God necessitates, or God requires, that you are involved, that you have something to say about this life that you are in, that you have something to do, that you have somebody to be. And I think if we can allow ourselves the grace to say, I'm going to mess that up every once in a while, I'm not really going to live fully into it sometimes, and accept that, and still say, okay, I'm going to do it. I think that's the beginning step of that. God wants us to be a part of this. God really truly is a dance partner, pulling us onto the dance floor to say, let's dance under the spotlight. Every encounter with God is like a rave where we dance under the thingamajiggers. What do you call those things? The lights. It's like all those fancy lights that are turning around. It's been a while since I've been in a bar. And allow that experience to happen. And it's sometimes awkward, especially when you don't know the song that's playing. It's awkward. You don't know how to move your body, but if you can allow yourself to give some of your power to that other person, they will teach you how to move into the rhythm of the song. And then as you're doing that, you might discover that the song changes and a new song comes up. And that song. So you know how to dance to that song, and you start teaching the other person to dance to that song. And ultimately that give and take, that sway back and forth between power, pleasure, delight, awe, wonder, ecstasy, becomes normative. And you won't ever want to leave that encounter.
Wow.
So Father Jerry, what is one goal or something? What is something that you believe that you and your immediate community can achieve, like in the next 6 months or a year? Is there something that you're working on that is just really at the core of your heart right now that that you would like to see come to fruition?
For myself personally, I'm trying to work more harder or intentionally around, I think, loving myself enough to make more of an effort to show up for the dreams that I have. And I think so often for clergy in particular, but I think in general for anybody that works in the caring profession, it's easy for us to prioritize the dreams, hopes, anxieties, and fears of those who we are tasked to care for. So much so that when we help you to get to where you're going, we are suddenly left with the reality that, hey, we have places that we want to go to, but all that kind of stuff. So I'm really living into the reality that I have dreams that I really want to make manifest in my life. I have relationships that I really want to happen, and I'm committing to do that as part of my discipleship, my walk with the Creator. And also, too, as a part of my ministry, as a modeling for other people to show how you can authentically live in this way, in this particular manifestation. And I think that, that's what I'm committing to. I really love that quote that I mentioned earlier from Mary Oliver. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And that's what I'm doing right now.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
That is beautiful inspiration for all of us. We're coming toward the end of our time, and I'm going to say just a little bit about upcoming times, but and then last week I closed us out in prayer, and so while I'm talking about next week, if y'all want to think about if anybody else would like to volunteer to close us out in prayer, then that would be awesome. So next week is Thanksgiving, so we won't meet next week, and we will meet the following week to just continue the discussion, and just stay tuned and hope you all join us, and we can just continue this fabulous conversation. And by the way, that is King Marco's birthday.
Oh, great. Yeah. And I also want to add that Reverend Dr. Jerry will be our guest preacher on January the 7th. So he will bring us the first message of the 2020-24.
Yay.
So we're excited about that. And so mark that on your calendars to be sure to tune in on January the 7th.
I started listening to some of I'd just like to really do you want to do a plug for your for some of your podcast or Facebook, or how we can follow up and get to know more of your theology, your teaching, your beautiful spirit?
Sure. So you can find me all over the internet by Googling the People's Priest, the People's, PEOPLE''S. And my podcast is the People's Priest podcast. I do a weekly short teaching on practical spirituality called Monday Musings. It comes out every Monday at 8:30 a.m. You can find that on YouTube. Right now, we're taking a little bit of a break, and we will start back up in February. But past episodes you can see on my YouTube channel, and on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I refuse to call it X because I think that's stupid. But Twitter is Threads, which is whatever that is. And you can just reach out. My ministry page on Facebook, the People's Priest, is the best way to get a hold of me. You can also go to my website, revjerrymaynard.org, and I will send you all these links so that you can have those. And always happy to to hear from folks. And if you need any spiritual support of any kind, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, let's close in prayer.
Would you do us the honor, Father Jerry, to close us out in prayer?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Let's bow our heads so we can look holy. Good and gracious God, who has many names and manifestations, we thank you that you are radically obsessed with us, from the top of our heads to the soles of our feet. And we rest this evening in the blessed assurance that your love is never failing, that your love is dynamic, it's radical, it calls us to be brave beings in this crazy society that we find ourselves in. But we know that every time we step our foot forward, you are stepping your foot forward with us, and you go and make the way plain for us. So we rest in this blessed assurance, and we rise in hope and in peace, knowing that tomorrow will bring beautiful blessings and beautiful gifts and new challenges and risks for us to take. And we know that all of it is good because all of it is you. And we give you thanks and praise for every single moment. And especially for this group, may many blessings and manifestations come from this. May healings take place. May every cell in the bodies of those who gather here on this Zoom call move and dance to the rhythm of healing and love. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 Bye.
And thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys
Good
next
night,
time.
everybody.
Night.
Good night. See you next time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.